So Mitja, first, let me just say something about your background so that people know who you are. And it's also interesting from the point of view of how you came to write the novel.
Yeah, Rawley,
Okay.
firstly, thank you very much for great translation.
Oh.
It's really of huge importance for me and for novel, of course.
Thank you.
About my identity. Maybe if I could tell you some kind of joke,
Sure.
I should say that I have three identities, which are in some kind of tension between each other. Firstly, of course, I studied comparative literature, and I was, in next 2 decades, I was literary critic, I was essayist, I wrote, for example, 3 books of essays, and I was editor for literature, for fiction, of course. And around 40s, I realized that it isn't enough for me. And alongside this career as literary critic, I approached cultural management. Firstly, I was, by I think 36, appointed as program director of European Capital of Culture. This is a huge project in field of culture, maybe the most visible project in culture on European Union level. And then
For the town of Maribor.
for the town Maribor, of course, it was 2012, I think. And then around 40s, I became director of publishing house. So now I'm caring about finances, about organization of working processes, and of course about management in general. And then I wrote, or I started with writing novel, with fiction. It was a surprise for me at first, of course. Why? I realized that I still have a problem with my relationship with my low sight, with my low vision.
Poor vision.
Yeah, poor vision. This was the main reason, I think. But these 3 identities are in Slovenian circumstances in some kind of tension, I suppose. Because if you are editor, if you are critic, you should be dedicated only to dialogue with others' literature. If you are management and you care about finances, you shouldn't be writer or literary critic. And if you are a writer, you shouldn't be someone who is interested for others' literature, of course, because writers are interested only for their own literature. And of course, you should not have anything with finances, because you live in high sphere, and you are in spirit, not in material things as finances are.
So you have the
So
three
I have 3 identities, as I said, and maybe you will ask me, are you mad? How can you live with these 3 identities? But I should answer that I don't see myself so serious as I saw myself before decade or more. Because I think that this distance, maybe a little bit of humor, is very, very important if you try to survive in recent reality.
So what happened a decade ago that changed your understanding of who you are, or your approach to life?
Yeah, I started with exploring my self-esteem, if I could say.
And that was connected with writing?
With writing, with my position in society, and especially this was connected with the problem of poor vision. Because before my 40, I had a statement that I have no problem with my poor vision. Often I told friends and colleagues anecdotes from my childhood and from my for my life, a little bit funny anecdotes, I suppose. And I thought, I am pretty much successful man, I have career, I have a family, I am okay, and this is not my problem. But then around 40s, I realized that this is not true, that this is simplification, that this is my homemade stereotype about me. And so I started with exploring my memories, my relations with other peoples, with institutions, with society in general. And then on second level, because I started with exploring my poor vision on very concrete level, because this is my very concrete physical experience. But on second level, we could say metaphorical level, I also found out that I also live in some kind of stereotype connected with the position of intellectuals in Slovenian society. Let's explain a little bit more. In Slovenia, you have situation that culture was some kind of compensation for lack of own state, because Slovenia is independent only 30 years. Exactly in June we will celebrate 30th anniversary, and we see intellectuals as some kind of prophets who will predict our future, who will give us solutions about problems in our society, especially in crisis times. In times of crisis, we ask these intellectuals, let's say us, what to do and so. And I realized that my position was also in that conditions. So that I was also some kind of, let's say, blinded prophet, which in every occasion told people, yeah, we should do this, culture should have stronger role in society, and so on and so on. And after this European Capital of Culture, this was for me maybe break with this stereotype. Yeah, I realized that this vision, the problem of vision, isn't for me only physical, concrete matter, but that this was also on metaphorical level the problem, and this was for me maybe the biggest surprise. And now I think that with writing of novel, I put these two dimensions of vision, of problem of vision, into the same narrative. And this was for me some kind of revelation, or maybe still liberation, if I could say.
Tell me about how you started writing the novel. You said the other day when we were chatting that
with Dusan Jovanovic,
that you had started writing memoirs, not a novel.
Because before, as I said, I wrote 3 books of essays. Dedicated to Slovenian, of course, world literature, especially prose. And in one essay, in last book, which was published in 2008, I think, I wrote also one essay, one autobiographical essay called Gothic Forest, in which I firstly explored my memory, how I deal with poor vision, because I have only remains of vision. I have only few percents of vision, And these remains of vision are in medical terms blindness.
Right.
Of course, I am not blind, but in medical terms, this is blindness. And I explored
Let me just
and
explain this a little bit. It's an issue in the book.
Yeah.
That you are and this is true of the character in the book as well. That you do have some kind of partial vision.
Yeah.
But that in medical terms you are completely blind.
Yeah. This was for me a surprise because when I applied for one kind of support, which you could have as you are visually impaired, I realized when a doctor said me, "Oh, great, you are blind." And this was for me shock because I have never try to have anything with these people, with these organizations,
with the
blind association, and so on. Because I'm normal, I don't have problem. But as I said, around 40, I started with writing down some kind of memories, and then I have lucky, I should say. I gave these memories, these texts, to Dusan Jovanovic, very well known, unfortunately dead, recently dead theater director, and he said me, "Hey, Čander, what do you think that your life in your middle age is so interesting for public? You're a crazy man. You should write a fiction, of course, connected with your poor vision, and connected with politics, and a little bit with sexuality, with sex, because people like this now." And I said, "Dusan, are you crazy? I am not writer. I am maybe smart man. I am, for example, candidate for chess. My value is ratio, not imagination." But he said me, "Čander, let's start." And then I started with writing, and I discovered a really big joy when I imagined the sequences, when I wrote dialogues. This was for me really some kind of liberation, I think.
I see. And so in the dedication to your novel, which is dedicated to your parents and to your wife, you thank your wife, Maya.
Yeah, Maya was really deeply dedicated to in process of editing of the novel. We spent I think 6 months or a little bit more, and we checked every sentence after sentence, maybe word after word. we spend this time in I think very dynamic dialogue. And of course maybe this is not so usual, but this improved our relationships.
Really?
Yeah, because you know when people are quarreled when they should work on text or so on, but this dialogue was for us very important, because we really very frankly discussed about literature, about life. And when you are after 40, maybe this is good for relationship, I
think it
suppose.
is, yeah. So when you moved from writing a memoir to writing fiction, you said you found it liberating.
Yeah.
But how much of the memoir did you preserve in the novel, or was it? Were these two completely different things?
This question is in Slovenia, of course, very, very often. I should face. I am facing with this question very
the
often.
Autobiographical
yes,
issue,
because
right?
we live in era of autobiographical or semi-biographical prose and
autofiction,
so on and so on. We know many terms about this activity, but maybe this will not be so important in audience in Great Britain. But I think that parts of the novel connected with my childhood are really not completely, but I think that these parts are autobiographical. But this recent reality in the novel, politics, media, and so on.
You were never actually a member of the government.
No. But for example, one state secretary said me when she read this book, yes, I see that you know the situation when you are first time on the session of government. These were my feelings, but I was of course never on that occasion. So this was for me evidence that I know the world of politics, and that I could imagine situations.
Maybe it would be good at this point just to explain something about the novel, about what, for people who haven't read it, because I think this is being broadcast at the launch. And this is about a man who is already a very successful book editor, already a public figure, who is, as you are, who has poor vision, and who has spent his life up to that point in a way trying to fit into the sighted world. And is that fair?
Trying to be someone. And so
yes, and not let the poor vision define him in any way. And in the course of the novel, he is invited to join a political party that then becomes the government of Slovenia, and he actually becomes what in here would be called a secretary, part of the prime minister's cabinet, and is given the responsibility for development issues and
decision maker or someone who is in power.
And so in the novel we see this person go from private life into already a public figure, but go into actually government, and takes on the responsibility for a huge project, which is very different from the one you had of the cultural thing, and yet there are obviously parallels between the project of the protagonist in the novel, who's never given a name. No one is given names.
No one.
And in that project, he runs into various problems and things. So I won't give it away, but it becomes very much a time when he is trying to find out who he is, trying to be successful, and in the process, he actually loses his family. His wife leaves him and takes their infant daughter with her, and now that did not happen to you. Just
no.
And I remember when I was reading the novel, for the first time, thinking the initial chapters, very easy to believe that this happened to you. That this is Mitja basically writing a story that's based on his own life.
If I could add one anecdote. My father read this novel, and then after, 100 pages, he was really disappointed with me. And he said me, you had mistress. You had another woman. How can you do this? I said, Father, this is fiction, this is novel. For example. And when my son read the novel, he was, of course, also disappointed because this main character has daughter, not the son. And I also said, this is fiction, my son.
Right. So you had some explaining to do to your family that this was not you in the novel, right? How about with other people? When you were, after you'd written the novel, after it was published and it received good reviews, what kind of response did you get from people who knew you at that point only as a book editor, only as someone who had been
I think that's smarter or people who are more deeply involved in reading, they reacted that at beginning of the novel, they, as you said, they thought that this is autobiographical prose because you have many similarities in my life, in my publicly known life, and also in the novel. But then after 40, 50 pages, they of course realized that this is not my own story. For example, comparison between these two big projects. Of course, European Capital of Culture was the project connected only with the culture, and I guess that this project successfully ended on the end, finished on the end.
At the end of the project.
At the end of the project. This project in my novel is much more broader in content. Dedicated with I don't know, pilot projects from many fields.
It's looking into the future of what will happen to Slovenia.
But what is similar? Similar is that the projects are happening in the time of crisis. This is second crisis. I wasn't prophet, and I didn't know that this COVID crisis will emerge.
Right.
But I put my novel, my narrative, into so-called second crisis, connected with balloons of finances and of course economic crisis, not with COVID. With
the novel is set probably in the late
because I think that this position of intellectuals are a little bit different in the times of crisis. As I said, people in time of crisis are expecting the answers, and people in power, decision makers or politicians, manipulate with these intellectuals, are dealing with them, and say their people, their crowd of people, hey, we have strong connection with these smart intellectuals, and they will say how to we go out of this crisis. And for this reason, I settled my novel into second crisis, not for a reason because I could forecast the happenings.
Right. Well, it's very much a novel about different spheres of life, the personal and the
of
political.
Course this was for me also a revelation in this project, European Capital of Culture. I had really much with politicians, and then I started to think about politics and politicians beyond stereotypes, beyond white-black painting, because they are also human beings, not only very bad human beings, only obsessed with power, only obsessed with greed. They are human beings with special nature, and this was for me some kind of revelation. And I hope that I depicted them in the really good picture.
Right.
Realistic picture, I hope, and as we said, with humor, because we should laugh, Rawley, because this is the main recipe for surviving.
Yes.
Not only today.
The main recipe for survival. Yes. Yes, it's true, and a lot of the humor, I think, in the novel comes from the language itself. One of the things that you've been praised for in reviews here is the energy of your language, in your dialogues, in the arguments that take place between the protagonist and his wife, in the the political speeches that the protagonist himself gives and that others give.
Maybe the reason is really this poor vision. You know that Aldous Huxley was a very strong writer in dialogues, and he was also visually impaired.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, and he had really good sense for of course for hearing. And in Slovenian circumstances, you have the situation that in many literary works, you could miss the differences between languages. And this was for me of really huge importance, that someone who became from, I don't know, media world, speaks on different way as someone who is in politics and someone who is in culture.
Right.
And this was for me really important. And of course, this was for me a big challenge, that I wrote short sentences. Before this, when I was writing about literature, about this word literature, I wrote really long and smart sentences. And when I have one of the first presentations of this novel, someone said me, "Oh, Mr. Čander, you were so smart, boy, but now this is not good, these short sentences." and I asked it, "Oh, good, this is success." I succeed.
Well, as the translator, I'm grateful for your short
Thank you,
sentences.
and thank you for good translation, because I think that this feeling for details in language is very important for translation, because I think that narrative, I hope, is interesting, but the secret, of course, in these different levels of language.
Well, I have to say, translating it, one of the things that I noticed was, of course, the different language registers, which are very well done, but also the visual descriptions of things are often, I mean, obviously you write from your own experience, but I had to remember that this is being conveyed by someone who has a very
and that you don't
specific way of
them.
seeing seeing things, and so something comes into view
and this
slowly.
was also one very good mission of my wife. She said me many times, go deeper in your reception of reality. Go deeper. Say what you see.
Yes. There's a wonderful point in the novel where the protagonist is moderating a discussion where one of the other figures is talking about something and using slides to illustrate her talk, and the protagonist is describing how he sees the slides. It's different blurs and blobs. And then it almost, what is interesting is that there's this line between what is seen from your vision and then what you're imagining it to be. And so the blurs and the blobs become something in your mind, but it's not necessarily what is actually on the screen.
Of course.
So that's very nice. And there are these points in the novel, if I might just finish. There are these points in the novel where the reader might be a little bit surprised, where the narrative drifts into a different level of speech, because you are then conveying the protagonist's imagination and perhaps even his unconscious in the way he's experiencing things. His memories are drifting back.
Yes, he's more and more insecure in this world. This is some kind of stampedo. This is some kind of I don't know, wild dance, which the fate or I don't know what is playing with him.
And often going back to the chess images that, that, like you, the narrator also was a serious chess player and a very successful chess player.
I was, when I was young, I was, of course, serious chess player. Now I am only for a hobby, but of course,
you don't
when you are
no longer compete.
No. But when you are once chess player, you are forever chess player, as I could say.
Right. Let's see.
Maybe you will read something.
Yeah, perhaps. Just let me see how we are with time. So let me read a chapter, which is when the protagonist is applying for a particular allowance as a disabled person.
And it's based, of course, maybe a little explanation before you starting with the reading. This was really the beginning of novel. This is not, of course, first chapter in the novel, on the final version, but this was for me this traumatic start of writing, because this was mainly autobiographical experience, and this was for me maybe beginning of this exploring myself.
And that comes through very, very nicely in the writing. We see how the protagonist is trying to understand exactly what his position is with regard to his sightedness or his lack of sight, and regard to the bureaucracy that is trying to decide whether or not he deserves to have this disability allowance. So let me it's a short chapter. And again, another thing that's nice is the dialogue in the chapter, which I think is really one of the strengths of the novel. At the Pension and Disability Insurance Institute, a single glance at the waiting room told me it was nothing like the government office where I normally updated my documents. Hunched over figures sat motionless on century-old benches, their caps pulled low on their foreheads. This was a defeated army in search of its last hope. Although I was sure that everyone was to some degree faking or at least exaggerating their problems, I could not help but feel that I was the biggest faker of them all. I really can see, I told myself, and in all honesty, I am not an invalid. I'm not crushed like them. I have nothing in common with their defeat. I work, I make money, and things are going quite well for me overall. I should just turn around, walk out, and put an end to this farce. When I was finally called into the office, the first thing I noticed was some black structure in the corner that was maybe a coat rack. Then a long L-shaped table. At one end of it sat a congenial young man who nodded at me encouragingly and pointed to a chair. Although the chair was only 2 steps away, he jumped up and offered to assist me. A stupid misunderstanding, I thought. After all, I'm not blind. I sat down with my coat on. I kept shifting uncomfortably in the chair until from somewhere, as if out of the depths, a voice floated up, a female voice. Last name, first name, year of birth, place of birth, permanent address, father's name. I answered into the air. I didn't see the woman. Maybe she was sitting behind the large filing cabinet. You can take your coat off if you want, the official across from me said. He was clearly the one conducting the proceedings, although up to now he'd been silent. So now I would have to stand up and take my coat off. I anxiously weighed my options. If I did it all smoothly, I would out myself as a person who had no need for the care and assistance allowance. If I haltingly stumbled to the coat rack, I would look like an idiot. The official in charge was slowly turning some papers. His bald head bobbed up and down. "Did you have any trouble finding us? There are lots of different streets around here." "I took a cab." "Ah, a cab." That worried me. What if taking a cab suggested that I was shamming? I might at least have made an effort, the way others like me do. Poor people don't take cabs. Officially, they weren't supposed to be assessing my economic status here, but you could never be sure. Still, it was about financial assistance, and the committee might hold such extravagance against me. "I see you don't use a white cane." "No, of course not." "All right," the official murmured. "If I'm not mistaken, you're able to see something, correct? Although here it says you're blind. How is that possible? Are you able to see or not?" I told him what I'd been telling anyone who asked ever since I was a child. "Yes, I can see, but my vision is impaired. I have a remnant of vision. I can see 10 or 20 times less what you can see. Compared to me, what you see is like looking through binoculars. You see the details, I don't. But you can see me." The official slipped into a more casual tone. "Yes, I can see you." I gave him my usual response. "I see an outline. I don't see wrinkles, creases, scabs, veins, eye color. I don't see the details. But today they operate even for really bad short-sightedness. I'm not short-sighted. I have a debilitated optic nerve, atrophy of the optic nerve. Unfortunately, nothing can be done about it." The official closed the folder and took a deep breath. I couldn't tell if he was simply digesting a heavy lunch or despairing over my case. A moment later, he continued, "Do you often get lost?" "Sometimes. Especially in a new place, I have to get used to the buildings and the streets. I make a map in my head. So when you're walking around, do you sometimes need help? Or, to put it another way, moving around on your own with no additional help is more difficult for you, is that correct?" "Sometimes." I was getting a little better at this. The honest answer would have been rarely, because I usually walk down more or less the same streets. "What about the loo? Do you go to the loo by yourself?" Such sudden crudeness, I thought, must be a mistake. After all, I'm a rather well-known intellectual, well-known and respected. But putting that aside, I don't think I'm better than anyone else, I really don't, but I have a document. My personal physician says that, in medical terms, I am blind. So what's this chap playing at? Is he bored? And what am I doing, letting myself being sucked into his game, strategizing my answers and getting myself in tangles? "They all have documents," the experienced official answered me silently. "And they all think they're important." And since I didn't respond, he said out loud, "I apologize for the question. It's nothing personal. We're here to verify your psychophysical condition. Didn't anybody tell you that?" Suddenly, nothing was merely a formality anymore. It finally dawned on me that there was a reason I had been summoned here. If at all possible, they were going to tear me apart and save the taxpayers a potentially long-term expense. I tried to focus the way I used to do in chess matches whenever my opponent came at me full force. I need to hold on a bit longer, just a bit longer. You probably don't have to be a total invalid to be a paid invalid and receive, if not the highest allowance, then at least something. I reminded myself that in many cases, even a draw can be an excellent result. I go to the loo by myself. So no one has to take you there by the arm. Again, I apologize. No, of course not. And how do you write? Do you dictate? I use a computer. I write, I don't dictate. A computer. Yes, a computer. I have a special program. Oh, that's right. You're a journalist. No, I'm an editor. I edit books, and I write. Well, I used to write reviews, book reviews. So how do you read, if I may ask? I read normally, with telescopic glasses, but sometimes without them. Until I was 25, I read without any, interesting. You're able to read and write on your own. Thank you, that will be all. I should have told him how my grandma had believed that reading and writing weren't meant for an unfortunate child like me, But Mama had persisted every afternoon, week after week. There was a lot I should have told him about reading and writing, but I just nodded my head. My mind had become sluggish and disconnected, had turned into dandelion fluff, into nothing, which drifted out through the door and back into the semi-darkness of the waiting room. I searched my pockets for a cap.
Thank you very much, Rawley. I suppose that it's visible why I have many times rewritten this chapter.
Really?
Why I have returned many times to this chapter, because this is a really big challenge. How, with a little bit sense of humor and distance, how could you speak about your own taboo? And this is really, this was really disappointment for me when I realized that I'm nothing in the game with bureaucracy. I am so-called famous or successful intellectual, and I am someone, but I am nothing. And of course,
Yes.
Along politics and media, bureaucracy is a really important topic for my novel.
Yes.
I don't know if the bureaucracy is after Kafka or Gogol or I don't know, old and big writers writing is still, if bureaucracy is still popular in the prose, but maybe this is strange. But I found out, of course, some kind of beauty in bureaucracy, in these conversations, on those details, how they could act, and this is, I guess, also important question of recent societies in Europe, not only about politicians and politics. Of course, also about bureaucracy. You know, maybe if I could expose only one example, when bureaucrats say that something will be more transparent and more simple, you should be aware that this will be more and more complicated.
Yes, yes. I just that's absolutely true. And of course, it's a universal experience. I think we all,
not only in Slovenia.
Not only in Slovenia, and not only with independent intellectuals. I think all of us have the sense that we have been dehumanized by the bureaucracy. And even though, as in this chapter, the bureaucrat who's asking the questions is polite and seems like an ordinary
Nothing personal.
guy. Nothing personal.
No.
He has to ask these questions, and
if you could go alone to the toilet, for
everyone is polite. The politicians all seem to be wanting to do a good job and everything like that, and yet the whole thing
they are just doing their jobs.
The whole thing just is making a mess of things for people. It's interesting. Tell me, there's a parrot on the cover. This is the Slovene.
No, this is exotic animal, of course.
This is the Slovene edition, and the edition that's being published in English also has a parrot on the cover. Why is there a parrot?
She is the only being in the novel with personal name, Coco, or he. I don't know.
Right.
And I feel sometimes like someone who is repeating truths and thoughts, and who isn't heard, and
who isn't heard.
Yeah, and who is someone who is in reality someone with repeated truths, with repeated recipes and so on, and maybe this was some kind of humor. This is not so seriously serious message. I don't know, because in the cover could be I or something mysterious and deep-minded. But I think that the sense of distance and humor is very important for this novel, and maybe the cover is only the mirror of this narrative.
Well, I would say that the parrot, and indeed not just the parrot, but other birds that appear in the novel, play a certain role in that they often seem to be reminding the protagonist of the reality.
Yeah, and for other reality. Yeah. Because he is deeply involved in one level of reality. And then from nowhere, from I don't know, next floor, some bird cried, "Wow!" And
so he hears something.
These are some kind of echoes of other levels of reality.
Right.
I think.
Right. Great. I think we're probably out of time.
Yeah, thank you, Rawley, because we know that audience has today attention for hearing maybe 40 minutes. Yeah.
Just to repeat the last point you made, because I think it's important. This novel, even though you deal with serious issues about identity and politics, it's very much a humorous book as well.
Oh, thank you.
And that comes through in
because
different
people,
situations.
I think that people in Western Europe are expecting from Eastern Europe very serious and melancholical books.
Yes.
I think that it isn't in that matter. Yeah.
Yes, no, it's great. I enjoyed translating it very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rawley, and of course, thank you, Susan, for effort, for
Istros books.
Yeah, this is for me really as I could play in Champions League in football when I am translated into English and I am published in English.